Since his arrival in the United States on Tuesday, Pope Francis has been preaching his message of tolerance and compassion everywhere, from cathedrals to soup kitchens, even stopping to make an historic speech to Congress along the way. It was the first time ever a pope has addressed a joint session of Congress, and his words at times brought both parties to their feet. Invoking Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln, Pope Francis exhorted legislators to go beyond partisan bickering in order to help ensure the continued growth of America and the well-being of all her people. Hoosier state representatives were in attendance, including Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly, who says the Pope's message was important and inspiring.
I just hope that what we do is put on the top of our desks and in our offices, in every office in the Senate and the House, the golden rule of do unto others as you would like to have done unto you. I have always believed that this place works so much better when we don't worry about Democrat, we don't worry about Republican, we just worry about America.
Indiana Republican Senator Dan Coates, who was also on hand for the Pope's remarks, said Francis' message transcends the borders of nations and the divide of political parties. And he hopes the Pope's words can provide guidance and encouragement to the nation. The papal visit to the United States will conclude on Sunday night. Everywhere Pope Francis goes on his North American tour, the Catholic faithful show up to get a glimpse of the pontiff. With 1.2 billion Catholics worldwide and 69 million here in the United States, crowds have been plentiful in Cuba, Washington, D.C., and New York. Now some Northwest Indiana Catholics are traveling to Philadelphia to see Pope Francis at the 2015 World Meeting of Families. They say their pilgrimage is rejuvenating their faith. Stephen Lattimore has more.
The Gary Bishop says that there are a number of churches here in Northwest Indiana that will be sending people to Philadelphia for the Pope's visit. For them, it's a chance to meet their spiritual leader, the man they say is the Vicar of Christ, or God's representative here on earth. The Pope's arrival in America has the Catholic faithful overwhelmed with joy. Thousands have turned out to greet him. Here in Northwest Indiana, the Gary Diocese, led by Bishop Donald Hine, will be sending parishioners on a pilgrimage to Philadelphia.
Yeah, we're really excited to be going to Philadelphia, certainly to see the Pope, to be with millions of fellow Catholics, to really celebrate our faith, grow in our love for Jesus, and give witness to the power of the gospel.
I think I'm expecting to see also a lot of excited people, but I'm also expecting to meet a lot of people who are so passionate about their faith and actively living it out. I'm also hoping that I see the Pope, so that's one of my expectations.
At Our Lady of Consolation in Maryville, they're celebrating a Mass in honor of their trip. They say they're excited about the Pope's vision for the church.
I'm excited about him. You know, I think he's a Pope that has his feet on the ground, can identify with the everyday person, and I think that's a value to the body of Christ.
He's from America, so he's closer to us. He speaks Spanish. We are Hispanics, so there's a connection there. And not only that, he's so humble. Just by looking at him, looking at his smile, he transmits the presence of God. We can feel it, we can sense it. His words, his smile, his humble presence gives the best message, more than words can ever say.
Part of this congregation will be attending the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia. They're eager to learn from the Pope about how to build strong Catholic families.
Focus of the encounter is really marriage and family and the beauty of family life. And we see in the family the love of God made manifest to the world, especially to children. So all of it is really a celebration of God's love for us. And it's just a great encounter both with the Pope and with each other.
There are 4 parishes heading to Philadelphia from Northwest Indiana. The ones who are lucky enough to go say it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
He will make my faith stronger because, you know, I believe and you know, he's representing God in earth. So just by being in there, I'm very happy.
We thought so much of it. We have a St. Francis statue in our backyard, which is a waterfall. The day that he was installed, we went out and we started that waterfall. Yeah, so that tells you right there, we think an awful lot of him.
The bishop says that this visit is also to remind followers that if you want to be a better Christian, you need to act more like Christ. And he says there's no better representative of that than the Pope. In Maryville, Stephen Lattimore, Lakeshore Report.
Both the legislature and the industry agree that positive train control is a good idea. But without any wiggle room, the South Shore is saying it means a quickly approaching end to commuter rail service in Northwest Indiana. The Association of American Railroads describes positive train control, or PTC, as a wireless safety system that can stop a train before certain types of accidents occur, can specifically help prevent train-to-train collisions, derailments caused by excessive speed, and movement of a train onto an improper track. When Congress first discussed implementing the system for U.S. commuter and freight trains back in 2008, railroad industry experts recommended an implementation deadline of December 31st, 2018. Instead, legislators mandated a deadline of January 1st, 2016. In a meeting this week, Metra and South Shore rail officials warned commuters that there will be dire consequences if that deadline isn't extended.
We will not be running this railroad on midnight, December 30, as of midnight, January 1st. Our trains, if there is no extension, every one of our trains will be in the barn. We will not be out. So basically, if we take people down on New Year's Eve, the last train home will probably leave Chicago sometime around 8:30 or 9. I would encourage, your listeners, our riders, those who ride the tollway systems that will become clogged if there is a shutdown, to advocate for it as well. Their voices need to be heard.
South Shore officials say that though there is growing congressional support for a deadline extension, there simply are not enough resources to implement the PTC system by the end of this year. This week, the United States Department of Transportation dropped its appeal of a ruling that, in effect, sent the entire Illiana Expressway planning process back to square one. In June, Judge Jorge Alonso of the U.S. District Court overturned federal approval of the Illiana, saying that the environmental impact statement submitted was both arbitrary and capricious in its violation of the National Environmental Protection Act. The judge was ruling on a case brought against the DOT and the Federal Highway Administration by Open Lands, the Midway Heritage Association, and the Sierra Club. Both the Illinois and Indiana Departments of Transportation have put plans for the Illiana Expressway on indefinite hold. After years of lobbying by Northwest Indiana organic foodies, the dream is finally a reality. Whole Foods has officially opened its brand new grocery store in Cherville, Indiana. The new Whole Foods store is located in the Shops on Main Mall along Route 41 in Cherville. And judging by the long lines, local residents didn't have any trouble finding it. Customers say they appreciate Whole Foods' strict standards for all its meat, poultry, pork, turkey, and seafood products that ensure all animals used are raised humanely and without added hormones. There's some other perks at the new store, including a fry station, a hot dog bar where you can have a hot dog prepared any way you like, and a juice and coffee station. Another special feature at the Cherville location, a bar where you can have a cold one and relax after you're done shopping.
It's very clean. Of course, it's new, but yeah, they have like a lot of organic stuff and stuff that you otherwise might not be able to get. My cousin here, for instance, got some mac and cheese. She said that was always sold out. Where did you go last time? Yeah, so.
The 40,000 square foot store will employ 150 people. The store will also support local not-for-profits through the Days of Community Giving program, where 1% of each day's net sales will go towards an Indiana-based charitable organization. An East Chicago resident is winning awards for her effort to solve crime, and a local school is winning acclaim for the way it deals with unruly students. These stories and more just ahead on Lakeshore Report.
Lakeshore Report wants to hear from you. Send your thoughts, concerns, questions, and story ideas to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. You can also reach us on Facebook and Twitter at Lakeshore Report. Make sure to tweet us using the hashtag NWI Pride, and you may see your comments on air. Lakeshore Report, providing you region-focused content.
Regularly, we want to bring you stories about people doing positive things around the region. We've asked for your input online using the hashtag NWI Pride so we can help highlight the people who make us glad to call the region home. This week's NWI Pride features a resident earning national acclaim for telling the stories of victims who might otherwise be long forgotten.
You got to point to his house.
There's a woman in Northwest Indiana whose passion to solve cold cases
This is a residential area, so somebody must have seen something.
Is as sharp and pointed as her stiletto heels.
You're very, a go-getter is what he called it.
Lisette Guillen of East Chicago says when people need help, they call the police. When police need help, they call her.
The families tend to really latch on to us, giving the family something tangible to keep it going. Hey, this case is still here. This is still happening. There's no shelf life on these videos.
Marker.
She's the host and executive producer of Crime Stoppers Case Files Chicago, a program with nearly 10,000 Facebook likes.
We put these little teaser ads on what the case is going to be about, and they get a lot of shares, a lot of likes, and we like to watch the conversations that are generated from it, and it always seems to happen in these smaller, closer-knit communities.
Facebook posts and tips have at times helped solve crimes. The page's popularity caught the attention of the FBI.
They love to watch our page because they like to see conversations generated and they like to see, where things may lead with it.
Recently, the FBI director awarded Guillen with the Community Leadership Award. Guillen says her show delivers more than just high ratings. It gives families hope.
You can't just shut them out. They have just now included you in a very intimate, private part of their life, and they've let you into a part of their heart that many people won't know or ever see. Did you see Tony the day that the incident happened?
Families like Mary Tolbert Lewis, mother of Antonio Tolbert. Tolbert was shot to death in a homicide July 2014 in Gary's Tolleson neighborhood.
Well, what I want to say to that person is, I don't hate you. I love you. And I forgive you. Turn yourself in.
On this day, Gary Police Detective Sergeant Mike Barnes is helping to reenact the crime.
Yeah, go ahead and bring that out.
We're at the location of the murder of Antonio Tolbert.
Both family and producers consider the show a community service that allows a victim's voice to be heard long after they're gone.
And as journalist is concerned, you try not to become attached to cases or to stories. As humans, we know that's just not possible. Actually, we had somebody who on our Facebook we had said we were in Indiana filming a case, and they said, no, it's supposed to be Case Files Chicago. And our response was, we go where we're needed.
I feel that y'all are just like a family to me, because the person needs to know how that person feels. Because having your son murdered, it could be their family as well.
A show where cold cases are treated with warm regard. In Gary, Hillary Powell, Lakeshore Report.
For more information about how to watch Case Files Chicago or to submit a story idea, you can log on to our website, www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Disciplinary issues are a concern not only in public schools, but charter schools as well. One Northwest Indiana charter school has found an effective way to deal with disruptive students. Lighthouse Academies of Northwest Indiana is using what's known as the restorative approach. Lakeshore Report's Michael Puente tells us more about this program.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Well, Lighthouse Academies face issues with suspensions of students, but the number of students getting in trouble has fallen off drastically. Joining me to talk about how this happened is Michael Gonzalez, spokesman for Lighthouse Academies. And Mike, thank you for joining us here on Lakeshore Report.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, tell us, how big of an issue was suspensions of students at Lighthouse, and how did you resolve it?
We had quite an issue with suspensions at the time. There was this traditional approach to discipline where a kid gets in trouble, you remove him or her from the classroom or the school. That doesn't accomplish much, actually. So we rebooted and we began to use restorative approach practices. So we went from 1,000, in one school alone, we had 1,040 suspensions over the course of 1 year. That ranged from a few hours to 1 day to multiple days. With restorative practices, a whole new approach to discipline and behavior, we went down to just 200 in 1 year. This year, we're projecting we'll have less than 100 suspensions across that school.
Well, Mike, before we get into talking about restorative approach, tell us a little bit about Lighthouse Academies. Where are they located?
Lighthouse Academies of Northwest Indiana. We have 4 campuses. 3 of them are in Gary. We have a K-2 school, grades K-2. We have a 3 through 7. And then our high school is a Lighthouse College Prep Academy on Clark Road in Gary, the west side of Gary. We also have a K-7 school in East Chicago in the Harbor section.
All right, well, tell me about this restorative approach. What makes it so different that you're having success with it? What does it involve?
It's a holistic approach to our students. So rather than see a kid as a problem child or troublemaker, when an incident occurs, our teachers, our administrators, our staff, we sort of stop the situation, collectively take a breath, and we help that child to gather his or her thoughts, to calm down, and to take another look at the situation. What we're finding is that a lot of those problems that what we thought were disciplinary problems are actually kids manifesting other things going on in their lives. And it's hard to control that sometimes. We all have bad days. Even at work, we have bad days. That doesn't mean we always act up or kind of act on impulse. So what we're finding is by taking that time to calm the situation down, listen to what the student is saying or going through, we can de-escalate and we can diffuse a situation. Now, in each case, the student then has some sort of ramification. So they have to do some community service or they have to do something to correct their wrong. But this is a really holistic approach to what's going on with our students' behavior.
So when did Lighthouse begin this program?
We began in earnest in the 14-15 school year, which was the beginning of this last school year. Each teacher is empowered to use whatever means he or she feels is necessary to use restorative approach. We also have them at the school level. Each school has a team of school culture folks, and these school culture folks, they meet with the kids, they talk through it. We're also doing some new and interesting things at the high school level. We're going to have peer juries. We have a mentoring program between high school and 8th grade. So we're really trying to understand what's going on in our students' lives, because if we can correct that situation without removing them, that child can have a better educational experience.
If people want to find out more about the restorative approach, where can they find that?
This is going on around the country, actually. We're really focusing on it here in Northwest Indiana. There's more information on our website, which is LHACS, Lighthouse Academy Charter Schools. But call the high school. We call the school, our local schools. We're online, and we can tell you a lot more information. But it's a fascinating approach to an ages-old problem, and it's working.
It's working, and you're helping to make it work. So what else can you say? Last thing, we got a couple of minutes here. What else can you say about the program?
Well, I like that each school and each teacher is empowered to do what works. That really develops a bond between the teacher and the student, and there's a trust factor there. And with that trust factor, these students, and we call them scholars, our scholars are then empowered to pursue their education, to stay in school. There are also team building exercises. There's a lot of life skills that go into this, but the whole point is we should not be throwing these kids out of school for every little thing.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. I'd like to thank my guest, Michael Gonzalez with Lighthouse Academies, for joining us here on Lakeshore Report. I'm Michael Puente. We'll see you next week.
About 42% of the general U.S. adult population has low vitamin D levels. That number is even higher among Hispanics and African Americans. Besides promoting calcium absorption and bone health, vitamin D may also affect the brain and cognitive function. A new study looked at the association between baseline vitamin D levels and the rate of cognitive decline in a group of ethnically diverse older adults. Catherine Dolph has more in this week's JAMA Report.
Sunlight and diet are the two main sources of vitamin D. Many people also take vitamin D supplements. However, having a low vitamin D level is still very common.
As the population ages, the fastest growing segment are the old and the oldest of old. And with that is an increase in the risk of cognitive dysfunction and outright Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Dr. Joshua Miller from Rutgers University, along with colleagues from the University of California, Davis, studied 382 older adults with an average age of 75. 61% were women, 41% white, about 30% African American, and 25% Hispanic.
Some of the subjects had outright dementia, some had mild cognitive impairment, and some had what we would call normal cognitive functioning.
Vitamin D levels and cognitive function were measured at baseline. Cognitive function was also followed in 318 of the participants for an average of 5 years.
About 60% of the group, regardless of their race or ethnicity, was low in vitamin D.
The study appears in JAMA Neurology.
Those who had dementia also had lower vitamin D status than those who had mild cognitive impairment or who had normal cognitive functioning.
Those low in vitamin D declined more in short-term memory, known as episodic memory, as well as more complex cognitive tasks, known as executive function.
Those who were low in vitamin D declined in particularly in two areas. One was what we call episodic memory, which is sort of a short-term memory test. And the other is what we call executive function, which is a more complex type of cognitive functioning. And those two domains in particular were declining faster in those who were vitamin D deficient or insufficient than those who were adequate at the beginning of the study. They were declining about 2.5 times faster than those who had adequate vitamin D.
Catherine Dolph, The JAMA Report.
The study is observational. Future studies are needed to determine whether vitamin D supplements can slow cognitive decline. It's time for The Times, our exclusive sneak preview of some of the top stories in this Sunday's Northwest Indiana Times. Occasionally, we'll talk to the reporters behind some of those stories in the state's second largest paper. This week, Times staff writer Joseph Pete talks unions and investigates the role they continue to play right here in Northwest Indiana.
The story I'm working on for Sunday is on the resurgence of unions in both popularity and membership ranks. We've seen a lot of union activity recently with the contract talks between USW and ArcelorMittal and US Steel. In Indiana, the union membership has actually exceeds what it was before the right to work legislation passed. It had been as low as 10.3% of the workforce in the state. Now it's risen all the way up to 12%. It's nowhere near what it had been when the manufacturing sector was doing stronger, but it is, there are 50,000 more people, union members today than there are when that legislation, which many consider to have been union busting, originally passed. Membership has been on the rise. Partly it's because the manufacturing sector is cyclical and it was doing poorly, but people who had been kind of idled or laid off have been called back to work. The Gallup poll found that 58% of the public now supports unions, up from 53% just as recently as, I believe, 5 years ago. It's really an outlier to see that dramatic a change in just a few short years. More people are kind of seeing the union perspective and the benefits that a union can provide as far as negotiating better salaries and so forth. The story explores several reasons. We are a manufacturing intensive state, and particularly here in Northwest Indiana, and the rate of union membership is higher here than it is statewide and nationally.
For more information about the story, check out this Sunday's Times or log on to www.nwitimes.com. And don't forget, for more information on any of our stories, you can go to lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time on Lakeshore Report.
Hi, joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Philip Bauman, music director and conductor of the LaPorte County Symphony Orchestra. Welcome back, Phil.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
It's been a little while, I think.
It sure has.
All right. Well, we have your children's concerts coming up.
October 14th.
Okay. And you're going to do the planets.
We're doing only a couple of the planets. Dr. Salgado, formerly from the Adler Planetarium, who's now with KV 265, is coming to, we're going to explore the universe. So we've taken a program which you're kind of familiar with his rendition of films for the planets by Holst, and we're going to explore Earth, the moon, the planets, and then the stars. So we're going to start a program with, on Earth here, with the Blue Danube, and the interesting part of that is his filmography is from outer space on the Earth. So the blue orb of the Earth is the blue of the Blue Danube.
That's nice.
And then we're going to play Clair de Lune about the moon, and filmography showing the effects of the moon on our planet, most predominantly on the oceans and the tides, but of course the moon in our horizon. And then we're going to explore some planets, Mars and Jupiter, specifically, and then we're going to go off into the stars with some music that the younger generation might be familiar with, Star Trek Into Darkness. So a wide variety of music for our young listeners to explore the symphony orchestra, but yeah, he's such a charismatic person and a lover of astronomy and music that I'm sure he'll be very engaging to our students.
And you target what grade ranges?
Primarily from second grade up to seventh grade, through middle school. the upper reaches of middle school. And so there's a wide spectrum of attention spans and people to connect with. But we do this on one day. We bring in 3 different sets of attendees.
Oh, you have 3 concerts.
Yeah, so it's very militaristic-like in the sense we bring them in, we herd them out.
March them in and
we
march them out.
And they get to see the symphony orchestra. But yeah, 3 times the orchestra gets a little lunch in between the second and the third show.
And this is at the auditorium where you typically
Yes, the
perform?
Civic Auditorium in LaPorte. It seats thousands of people. So on a good year, we may reach up to about 5,000 or 6,000 students in one day. So
that's
it's an
fantastic.
amazing thing. Yeah.
And for a lot of them, this is the first time that they ever have attended a live symphonic orchestra performance.
Exactly, and that's what we hear from the teachers and the superintendents and the educators is the excitement of the children when they come back from that experience of having, they all have earbuds in their ears most of the time, but this is a real live orchestra with real live human beings playing great music. So we get there, and they're at that age where they'll probably be deciding if they want to play an instrument.
That's right.
So they can really get that firsthand experience.
And do they get dressed up, some of them, to come to the concert?
Sometimes they do. I mean, if it's a theme, they might dress up in that, but most of the time they really, it's like we're going to a major concert, so we have to dress up in our best, and it's a big deal.
It's really great to see that. Well, good luck with the concerts, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, John.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts. Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.